Hi there, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Adrian San Miguel. I'm a principal solutions architect at AWS, and today I'm joined here by Shantanu, the senior director of product management for cloud security at Tenable. Say hi, Shantanu.
Hey, Adrian. Very nice to join you this morning. Wonderful to be here to talk to you guys about what we're doing at Tenable for cloud security.
Sounds awesome. In my background, I've done everything from providing audits for DoD compliant endeavors. Back in 2016, when the Office of Personnel Management had that widely known hack, I was involved in part of the remediation. So this is kind of bread and butter for me, and I'm actually really glad to be here speaking with you today. So can you help me understand what the problem was before and how Tenable's come about to help solve this problem?
Yeah, absolutely, Adrian. Before I start that, let me just give you a quick background on how Tenable has evolved. Right.
Yeah,
So,
please.
as anybody in security, especially red teaming and even sort of blue teaming knows, right, Nessus is one of the most foundational tools for security testing. Right. I know I used to use that in college when I was doing red teaming in our sort of cybersecurity Olympics and stuff like that. I'm sure you've used it. So it's one of those things that we've all kind of grown up with, right? But as Tenable has grown and evolved as a company, we've gone from vulnerability management now to strongly authoritatively exposure management. It's looking at things a lot more holistically. Vulnerabilities is a key part and a key aspect of that. But we take a look at the entire exposure surface. Organizations are not thinking in terms of just vulnerabilities. Attackers are certainly not thinking in terms of just that. So a security vendor, and especially somebody, vendor such as Tenable, absolutely needs to think a lot more holistically. So we have a view of the entire attack surface, and the new Tenable One platform ensures that we give our customers a correlated holistic view of exactly what the problems are in their environment. So that's what Tenable is doing. Now, trying to sort of correlate that into cloud security. I think one of the challenges that we always hear from our customers, and you can tell me this as well,
All
is
right.
that adoption for cloud security has always been a bit of a challenge, right? And cloud security itself is not very well understood. God, I mean, 7, 8 years on, I remember I was a developer when we were trying to move an application from old KLO data centers to public cloud, and of course, AWS was the public cloud of choice, and we tried all kinds of things. So, I mean, I'm sure you've heard enough that security is still not very well understood. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Many customers approach me as a black box. The number of times I've had a 100 level understanding of, hey, help me understand how CloudTrail can help me figure out who did what, but what am I going to do about these different events? And how can I integrate this with what my security team's doing already? And where do I get started on using AWS WAF or potentially CloudFront as my edge perimeter? It's good. It's a good enough starting point. But once folks get into the red teaming aspect of perimeter defense and event management, it gets really confusing for many customers. So I'd really love to hear about what you guys are doing more in this space.
Yeah, exactly, Adrian. So, I mean, you laid out the challenge better than I could, to be honest. Right? Cloud providers are providing plenty of tools, but customers are missing the guidance and a holistic view on what they can do. Right?
Yeah.
So this is a problem because it's neither easy nor is it quick to kind of figure out. Right? And honestly, if you think back, that was the promise of public cloud. Right? I mean, like businesses like, yay, public cloud. That means scale. Awesome. That means speed. Brilliant. And then security comes in and says, hang on,
Wait a minute.
not so fast,
Yeah.
right? There are things that we don't know yet, right? So that's the big problem. And as you know, like if you wind the clock back 5, 7 years, all of the major breaches have been misconfigurations, right?
Mhm.
Misconfigurations of your cloud infrastructure has been the root cause because everybody wants to move fast. But we all know, right? Spinning up new infrastructure in AWS is click, 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 or a few commands from the command
Mhm.
line, and away you go. But you don't know everything that you spun up underneath, right? So security needs to think differently, right? Security can't be the last gate. It can't be the last sort of stopping point. that then slows down business, but it has to be integrated at every step. And security also has to be much more intelligent, because now with cloud, you're inundated with the number of signals that you see from a security point of view. So prioritization and really exposure management, right? Being able to surface up the most important things. That's what becomes extremely important in helping customers understand how secure or insecure they are.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. The number one complaint I hear from partners and customers alike is alert fatigue. Once the
exactly.
wheel squeaks too much, nobody cares anymore. And if I remember correctly, most of the recent breaches were, yeah, we got an alert on that, but we didn't do anything about it, or we didn't know which action to take about it. Which
Exactly.
kind of leads me to a bit of a question. So we've identified the problem. We understand where Tenable can absolutely help customers out in this endeavor. What do you think will help these folks out to better protect themselves?
Yeah. So if I were to give an answer in one word, I'd say Tenable One. But let
Okay.
me let me break that down into what that actually means.
Yeah, please.
So as I mentioned, right, we are working towards an exposure management platform. That's what we want to bring to the customer. And there are really three key aspects to that. One is visualization, right? You can't defend against what you don't know. You can't have blind spots anymore. And what that means is that you have to be able to visualize all of your assets, all of your findings, everything that you have under sort of one umbrella. But it can't be siloed, right? It has to be unified. People need to understand that you can have sort of breaches in one part of the infrastructure that can be utilized to then laterally move to another point in the infrastructure, and you go from something that was benign and mundane to crown jewels in the cloud, right? So part of the challenge is that sometimes in order to test some things at scale, you'll have very well-meaning engineering and sort of performance testing teams, platform teams, just say, all right, I need to be able to test my application at scale. I'm just going to hook it up to my database, which is this giant, large database, and I'm just going to run my tests, and I'm going to spin everything down, and away we go.
Yeah.
And, you know exactly where that story goes, right? So you
Yeah.
have to be able to do things. You have to be able to visualize things, and then you have to be able to prioritize them, right? But that's all good. That's great, right? If we have this approach of unified visibility, extremely sort of precise prioritization, but that's still just looking at things reactively, right? Problems
Yeah.
exist, and it's a sort of race condition between you and an attacker at that point, right? So how do you go from being reactive to preventative and proactive? And that's something that I really want to deep dive with you today, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Um,
looking forward to it. But briefly, can you help me understand a little bit better? How does Tenable view exposure management with respect to cloud security? Is that something that should be ingrained from the ground up, or is it something that where the average customer or consumer generally is going to have to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I need a little bit of help here"?
yeah, absolutely. So exposure management, again, right, starts from being able to understand all of your assets, right? You need to be able to understand everything that you have running in cloud. And what that means is, so if you go completely vertically in cloud from all the way down to your base infrastructure, you understand what are the workloads that are running, what are the app pieces of the infrastructure, what are the workloads, whether it be containerized, sort of, whether it is EKS or Fargate or what have you. What are the applications running on top of that? How are those applications built, right? And then eventually sort of correlate that with what your business metrics are, right? So you do that first in cloud, and that's all great. But no organization has only a cloud infrastructure today, right? So you have to be able to understand what are the various input points into that cloud infrastructure, right? There is probably domain controllers that you guys still have, or customers still have. There are active directories that they're running. Some may be running that along with along with other cloud-based identity providers. Customers are running their applications. The same application could be running in cloud. It could still be running on-prem. So there's a level of complexity here that really needs an understanding of correlation between all of the different asset types, where they are, how they're running, where are the issues, right? So that's as I was saying, right? That's the first part of exposure management. Understand what you're running, then go through, find all of those correlated findings, right? Attack paths can go from on-prem to cloud very, very quickly, just because you may have an identity associated with a workload running in AWS, and then that workload has other IAM roles associated with it, which now gives it a different way to move laterally, right? So things in cloud work very differently. But now this is all about figuring out what your exposure is. What about how do you solve for that exposure, right? I mean, cloud, because it's constructed differently, you're not going to go in and fix all of the vulnerabilities one by one. You're going to go to the AMI and you're going to solve the problems in the AMI, and then you're going to spin up new workloads. Same thing for containers. You're going to solve the base image, the applications, and then so exposure management takes all of this information to help you visualize, prioritize, and then be able to effectively democratize and communicate, right? You need to understand how you're doing over a period of time, calculate your correct metrics, your SLAs, and then be able to communicate that. So that overall democratization of how your security program is running is part of the overall goal of exposure management. And that is what Tenable One is all about. Understanding all of the data from all of the different sensors in your infrastructure and your applications to be able to report it out. I'll just give you a very, very quick example.
Yeah, please.
Customers today come and talk to me about, hey, we are running a particular application. We want to understand everything about that application. Right? I'm like, okay, what that means is that you need to be able to go completely from top down, because maybe there's an e-commerce platform that they're running, or maybe there's an IT workload, maybe there's an ERP that they're running, right? They need to understand things at that level. And you don't want to be seeing these things differently or separately at that point, right? How do I understand holistic risk for a business application? You have to look at it at the application level, at the workload level, at the infrastructure level, at the data level. And that's what we help you do.
Awesome. I guess that leaves me with the $1 million question. How does Tenable Cloud exposure management foster security and kind of help give that warm, fuzzy feeling to people without slowing down the development process to hit those goals you mentioned?
Yeah, you hit the nail on its head, right? The original goals were what? Speed, scale, and security without slowing down the business, right? Adding value. So we do this really by letting people do what they're good at and what they want to do. I mean, imagine, right? That's what we wake up for every morning, right? To be able to do our jobs, we will do it fast and not think too much about the other things that we don't quite enjoy. I can tell you, when I was a developer and I was writing code, and we're still sort of, there's these 2-week sprints, and then there was a release at the end of the month, and then somebody would come down and say, oh, hey, by the way, here are all the problems that we found with the third-party packages, and here is why I'm not going to let this go. Maybe the base image that you used was wrong. It was just horrible. I'm like, I did all of this work, and now you're telling me I can't let people use it and play with it, and I can't get feedback, right? So I feel the pain.
I remember being that guy, having to walk up to the devs and say, hey, everyone, I hate to tell you, Hazelcast is working great for the implementation. It's helping us have quorum and heartbeat, but you're still in the infrastructure, so you got to roll it back. Sorry. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh man, I remember Hazelcast. Oh, geez. You're bringing back some good memories here.
Good or painful?
Well, both sides, of the same coin. Yeah. So Adrian, really, like I said, right? Let's let people do what they're good at and what they really want to do, which means that developers should be able to continue writing application code. But when they're writing that code, we alert them to, hey, you know what? Here are the problems that if you write it in a certain fashion, you are going to hit a little bit later, and it's going to be compliance failure. So just fix it now, right? Let's say that's not the place. Let's say everybody does a great job. Still, there are some problems, or maybe security team changed the standards now that things are more stringent. Now, when things are in pipeline and you're getting ready to deploy, we want to be able to put the checks there so that we can prevent things from going to cloud, right? From being exposed, or we can just be looking at runtime. And when we're looking at runtime, that's where we do all of the scanning anyways, and we find out all the problems, and away we go, right? Now, you can treat these as that being the aspirational order. But what actually happens is that people are scanning in runtime, and they find all the problems in runtime. And like I said, right, it's a chicken and egg solution. It's a chicken and egg or a race condition. Um, so you go and try to fix the problems in runtime because that's always going to be needed anyways, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's where it's always going to be the slowest and the most expensive. So we have to be able to do things a little bit better. I can just show you that without talking a whole lot more about this. So let
Yeah,
me
please.
share my screen if that's all right.
Yeah,
And
please. Love to see it.
okay, that should be coming in now, right? Okay. So we talked about securing production, right? We have to be able to start with that because that's where our crown jewels already are, right? We want to make sure that nobody gets in there. And for that, you go through Tenable Cloud Security, offers you full stack visibility. And this is where you're able to see all of your findings after running a scan. Onboarding is super quick, but as you can see, you can have many thousands of alerts. You can have tons of vulnerabilities, tons of misconfigurations, and you want to make sure that you get through these things, but you're able to understand these, prioritize these, and operationalize the fixes, right? So this is the bread and butter, making sure misconfigurations and vulnerabilities are identified and resolved with all of the context, right? You can create tickets, or you can also even create pull requests from our product, because you see both code and cloud. And how do you see that, right? You see that by going one step before this. And let me move to the next section. One step before this is what? All of your build environments, right? This is where we're able to scan your registries, be integrated in your pipeline, or take a look at your repositories and understand what are the vulnerabilities that exist over there, and what are the misconfigurations that exist over there, so that before you deploy to cloud, you can interject in here in a preventative fashion and ensure that bad things don't get to cloud. So it's faster for sure, and it's definitely cheaper because now you're not involving as many teams. And this looks like the following, right?
Okay.
You have your and here this is an example with a Jenkins pipeline, but you can do this with almost any pipeline. Whereas part of your deployment process, we are able to hook in our scanners, and then as your deployments are going through, as your pipeline is going through, once the scan finishes, you get a report right within your pipeline whether it worked or it failed, and it's taking a bit. But once that finishes, you're told that you have problems and we broke the pipeline. Now, because that's not very good, you're able to see that we, at the same time, create a pull request. So because we can see your repositories, we can create a pull request with something that is a recommendation from the product. And all that the developers have to do is go through and just merge that pull request in. And once that is done, the pipelines will just automatically work. So what did we do here? I'm going to quickly take a pause here. What did we do here? We identified the problem. We were able to solve the problem. And developers, all they had to do was just do a quick merge. And everything is clean again, right?
This speaks to something I preached for a long time, valuing carbon over silicon. Let the machines do the best of what they do, automate where you can, and let the humans do the high value tasks. This is
exactly
fantastic.
Exactly. So this is not where we want to stop, though, Adrian, right? Because this still takes developers outside of their workflow, right? I thought I was done with my work and I had moved on, and I was working on the next release. I was working on the next set of tickets. I was solving the next problems. Why are you asking me to do this stuff again, right? So let's take a step further back and see if we can make this even better, right?
Okay.
And this is where we go all the way back to local developer environments. And this is where, at the time, developers are writing their code, their IAC, especially in this case, we can actually just interject and tell them that, hey, guys, maybe do a little bit better. So we have a plugin which can scan CFTs. And as you go through and run your run the scan, it just tells you right within there. Now we give you a report in there, so you don't have to go to the console, but the same thing is reflected eventually in the console as well. And as you go through and fix it, these things disappear and your pipelines run clean. So now with this, I have not even taken people outside of their workflows. The problems that are identified can be solved at the time of build, and away we go.
I've got to say that is quite impressive. I remember a while back doing some research with some SIs to help understand the impact to the partner and the customer, what it costs them to go down rabbit holes and do low value tasks that could otherwise be automated. And on average at that time, I'm sure it's gone up since, it was about 38 shift hours per day per shift that were wasted doing things like that. So when we talk about not pulling people off of their normal workflows, not distracting developers from doing what they do best, not bugging the security team to sit there and manually scan every repository, or sit there, as we talked about before, running Nessus, trying to figure out what's going on. You've solved that. You've really taken away that significant pain point and are working to make developers' lives better. I've got to say, this is pretty impressive.
Awesome. No, I'm glad that you see the value, and I'm glad that you're hearing the same type of things from our customers as we are. And the kicker in all of this is that security is still very involved, because it's security that's writing all of the policies, and it's a single policy framework which is applied as code. So security folks can use a no-code editor within our product to codify their policies, to codify benchmarks that they want to utilize. And those get pushed, the same policies get pushed in the pipelines and all the way down to developers. So developers don't need to know the intricacies of security. They just need to know that they have to fix some problems because they're non-compliant. And security people don't need to understand application. They just need to say, these are the standards that we want to apply, and here are our custom policies, and away we go, right? So having that single sort of policy framework that goes across the board and is codified helps tremendously.
Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of hours that have been saved, and in a security person not having to learn the intricacies of an application, and a developer not having to really go about and figure out what exactly it is that security is looking for, without having it, collated and presented in a pretty easy way via plugin.
Yeah.
It raises a question for me. There's always going to be folks that raise their hand and say, hey, that's cool. We're very comfortable with our reactive security posture, and we think that we do okay like that. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are in that type of mindset.
Yeah, look, I think reactive security is always going to be required. There's a need and a place for it, because there are certain things that you will only find in runtime. And additionally, when you have to be able to look at your runtime, you have to look at runtime. There's always going to be need for a SOC and a NOC, because operations and operational security is just that important. But that's reactive for a reason, and reactive breeds a particular type of process, or lack thereof, right? Whenever you have a finding, it's always chaotic, and it's always expensive to resolve, right? You've got the brand damage already. Now it's about fixing that, right? So while we think that there's always going to be a place for reactive security, we want to make sure that the funnel, the problems are funneled before that, as many as possible. 0 days will always occur in runtime, no matter what you do. So we want to make sure that we get down to just that piece, right? That alert customers to 0 days as quickly as possible, and help them patch as quickly as possible, but solve for everything before that, right? I mean, there's a crazy statistic that some very high percentage, more than 60 or close to 70% of breaches utilize violations that are ages ago, right? They're years old, right? That should not be acceptable, in my opinion. In this day and age, when we can see everything beforehand, right? So yeah, that's really our stance.
That unfortunately had to live through the Sasser and Slammer epidemic way back in the day. I can definitively say that, yeah, appreciate everything that you're doing in the space, valuing the place and absolute need for reactive security, and marrying it with something that can really help simplify the lives of everybody within an organization. Is that about a fair statement?
Absolutely, that's what we're here to do, and that's what we hope to achieve and make everyone's life a little bit more productive, a little bit more secure, and a whole lot more fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Shantanu. And that about wraps it up for us. Thank you so much to our viewers for tuning in and joining us today. And Shantanu, is there anything you'd like to leave the group or the audience with as a bit of a leave behind call to action?
Yeah, absolutely, Adrian. We have an open source project. It's a very, very popular infrastructure as code scanning project called TerraScan. It's available on GitHub. We'd love for everybody to check that out. And for Tenable Cloud Security, we host a coffee break twice a month where we talk about all things cloud security, exposure management, Tenable One. So I'd love for everyone to check that out. Details available on tenable.com. Please feel free to make your way and come find us on a coffee break.
That sounds great. I look forward to joining a coffee break, taking a look at the open source repo, and collaborating with you all in the future. Thank you so much for your
Wonderful.
time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.